Hi everyone, welcome back. So in this demo video I'm going to show you, or rather elaborate on the basics of animation based on what we've been learning in class. So this is the Pong exercise that we worked on in class, so let's get on with it. So first thing I'm going to do is look at the sample video, the one that I've created already, so that we can have a look at it for reference as to what is expected from the exercise. So basically we have two paddles moving up and down, and it is basically both of them are playing a bit of tennis or table tennis or Pong or whatever you want to call it. And what we're going to do is I'm going to supply you with the file that has the two paddles moving up and down. What we need to do is animate the ball so that it looks realistic, so that the game of Pong looks realistic. So let's start off. First thing I'm going to do is grab the exercise file and drag it into the timeline so that it creates a new sequence, and if we play that back, you'll see that we have the animation of the paddles going up and down, simulating the game. What we now need to do is add the ball into this and animate the ball. So let's do that now. Alright, I'm just going to stop there. So here we have the tennis ball. That's the PNG image which has the transparency in it. Grab that, bring that just above the Pong exercise file onto video track number 2. Since that's a still image, it's a PNG still image, we have the option of dragging it all the way to the end, and we should do that because we do need the still image all the way to the end of the exercise file. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is basically get that ball into its very first position, which should be ideally somewhere around here. If for example we look at the reference file, we can see that the ball is in that position before the paddle on the right comes and strikes it. So let's do that first. To do that though, we need to have a look at exactly where that paddle over here comes and stops. I think it stops somewhere here. To find that position, we can simply move the playhead along. There you go, it moves and then it stops somewhere there. So let's use our backward and forward arrows to move the playhead up and down. There you go. I reckon that's the frame where the paddle actually stops there. Now what we're going to do is move the ball there and place it there as a first position for the ball. Let's see how we do that. So I told you the first thing to do when you're starting animation is pick the layer that you are planning on animating, come up to effect controls. If it isn't picked up here, you just need to pick the effect controls tab, and there you go, it's appeared. And then the tennis ball PNG video layer, or rather the image layer, is also represented up here. That's the entire duration of the tennis ball PNG layer. So first thing I'm going to do is come up to motion, hit the drop down arrow, and I'm going to hit the stopwatch button because that's the first thing, or ideally the first thing you should do when you are starting to animate. If you don't hit the stopwatch button, you are not going to record your positioning or your scaling coordinates. So let's hit the stopwatch button, very important, and that automatically creates a keyframe, and that little keyframe is now going to record any changes in the positioning coordinates over here. Alrighty, so I told you there are a couple of ways of moving the ball into its first position, or for any position that for that matter. You can manipulate the X and Y axis properties, the numbers here. That's one way of doing it. So for just this particular position, let's do it that way, and I'll also show you another way that you can actually manipulate the ball's position. Right, so let's have a look. Now if I go back and play this again, so the paddle comes and hits it there, and what I'm now looking for is where that paddle, the second paddle on the left, where that paddle goes up to and where it stops, because that will give me the position, or rather the second position, where the tennis ball should be next. So let's move back and forth a bit. So I'm playing that back, it stops there. Use my backward arrow to find the spot where it stops. So I reckon that's the frame. Now the first time I moved the ball over here, I used the properties here, the X and Y properties, but there's also an easier way. Well, I can't say that it's easier. It might be easier in this particular exercise, but for another application, it might be easier to use the numbers as opposed to what I'm about to show you. So the second way of moving the ball around is by simply clicking on this little box over here that's to the left of the word motion. If you click that, you'll see that the ball is indicated on screen with that bounding box, and all you need to simply do is pick the bounding box or pick the ball and simply drag it to that second position where you know it should be at. Okay, now that's position 1 and that's position 2. A lot of students have asked me, Kevin, what is that line? Well, that line is simply the motion path. That's the first point where the ball is, and that's the path that the ball travels. Now when I move the ball over here to the right for its next position, you'll see that that motion path will start there, come up to here, and then turn around, and the motion path will extend all the way up to there, and it's going to go zigzag as well as move along with on the exercise. So let's see how that works out. Now I'm going to move to the next position, but before I do that, I'm simply going to go back and let's have a look at that first bit of animation we've done. So I'm moving the playhead back. Right, so everybody's standing still. Here comes the pedal, bang, and it moves over there. Right, so that's our first bit of animations. Now I'm going to let this play till the right pedal comes and stops over there. Move backward a bit. That's the position. Grab. Make sure I pick the tennis ball. I can once again hit that little box there in front of motion and drag the ball to its third position. Okay, I'll show you what you can do with this motion path, a couple of other things that you can do with that motion path, which makes animation quite interesting. But for now, let's just get the basic positions right. Then I'm going to move to the next position, which is the left pedal moving down up to somewhere here in the center. Grab the ball again and move it down here. So there you can see the motion path sort of doing a zigzag now. Now that obviously will not be visible when you're actually playing your video back. Let's then move on to the next position, which is the right pedal moving down, and it stops there. Yep, that's the frame. Grab the ball again and move it over there. Now I wonder whether you notice that each time I move the ball, a new keyframe gets created. That's because Premiere is recognizing that there are changes in this position value that are occurring. Okay, which is fantastic. So I don't have to, for example, go over here and hit that add or remove keyframe button each time I make a move, or rather move the ball around. It automatically records a keyframe. You do also have the option of moving your playhead to a particular point, hitting the add or remove keyframe, and then changing values, which will all pretty much have the same result. The result being that it records the position of the ball or a particular object exactly where the playhead is at in that particular timeline there. Okay, so now where are we at? So let's just move back to the previous one. I also did mention it's very important to navigate, or rather go from keyframe to keyframe. If you wanted to check the position of the ball, make sure you use this forward and backward little arrows, which are basically go to next keyframe. So that's go to next keyframe in front, that's go to next keyframe, previous keyframe. Alright, so let's just quickly check this. So it appears to be fine there, appears to be fine there. I think we have one last one to create, which is down here. According to my sample video that I created, the ball is supposed to actually end up going off screen, or maybe to the corner of the court, and this fellow over here actually misses that shot. So you can create any little story that you like, but I'm going to stay true to my sample. So I'm going to move my playhead there, and so while he's coming down, while he's somewhere there, I'm going to drag the ball and make it so that he's missed it. Okay, now let's just play this back and see what's happened. Okay, we'll just click away to make sure that our path disappears off the screen. Here we go. Yep, so that appears to be fine. That's pretty basic. Now there are lots of other little things that you can do to make this animation look a lot more realistic. Let's see what some of them might be. So what I'm going to do first off is at position number 1, I'm going to make the ball smaller, as in scale the ball so that it looks a little more realistic in size when compared to the pedals. And I'm going to make it larger as it flies over this net area here to sort of give the impression that the ball is actually flying over the net and is coming closer to the camera, so to speak, and so it'll get larger as it flies over the net and then come back to normal size as it reaches the next pedal. So let's see how we'll do that. So first thing I'll do is I'll go to the first position keyframe. Now what we're going to animate is scale, the scale property. So I'm going to click my stopwatch to begin with, and I'm going to scale this down to make the ball look a little more realistic in size. So let's agree that that is somewhat the correct size. Now you'll notice that as soon as I scale the ball, it has moved away from the paddle. Okay, so initially that position setting was fine, but now that I've scaled the ball, I'm going to have to adjust that position setting so that the ball is actually touching the pedal. So all I have to do is simply adjust this value that will move it horizontally to the right, and there we go. Now it's touching, so that first position is fine. Then what I'm going to do is move along to the next position over there. Now you can see again there's that gap because I made the ball smaller, so I'm going to adjust this position as well again, and there you go, it is now touching the ball. Now also, while the ball was over here, I scaled it down to 46%, and it has retained that 46% size even at the next position. However, I haven't changed that value. Because of that, even though I moved to the second position on the timeline, I haven't changed the scaling value. As a result, it hasn't created a second keyframe. So I'm going to have to add a keyframe. Now, the reason I need to add a keyframe as opposed to a keyframe automatically appearing is because I didn't change the value. I didn't change the scaling value. If I did, it would create a keyframe here automatically. But nevertheless, I want to record a scale size of 46% here, so I am hitting add a keyframe, and that records the 46% here as well. Now, if we move back and have a look at this, we have the ball perfectly traveling over, which is fine. The only thing is that we haven't achieved that ball getting larger while it travels over the net. So what we'll do is ideally move back in time. Okay, somewhere there it's more or less at the spot where it's traveling over the net. So here we'll simply scale the ball a bit. Okay, there you go. When we scale the ball, and since there's a change in value of scale, the keyframe gets added automatically. So what I'll do then is go back and just play that back and see how that looks. Yep, there you go, ball gets bigger and then travels down and so on and so forth. Now I'm going to quickly do that for the other plus spots as well. So I'm going to move to the next position, add a keyframe to ensure that it's 46, come to the center, maybe not make it as larger as we did before, move to the next position where the ball is. Now again, I'm going to have to adjust that gap. Make sure we adjust the gap, then make sure we add a keyframe so that the 46% scale size is recorded there. Then come towards the center where the ball is traveling over the net, scale that up a bit, maybe let's make that very large, sorry, and then we will move on to the next position. So that's fine, it's at 46%, and then that next again it needs to record the 46%, so I'll add a keyframe and I'll also adjust the gap there by changing that value. That's perfect. Then I'm going to come back again to where the ball's just flying over the net, and I will add a keyframe, although actually as soon as I start scaling, the keyframe's going to get added. And there we go. And let's move on to the very last keyframe where the ball's gone over there. Again, I'm going to add a keyframe to record the 46% scale, and move back to the center where the ball's flying over the net, and scale it so that it creates a keyframe for a larger ball. Now, let's have a quick look at what we've done up to now. Ooh, alright, so there's one point there that I haven't adjusted, so let's go back there and adjust that. So at that point there, and to make sure that I'm on the correct keyframe, I must use these arrows. There you go. It moved a little bit. Now if I went and made a change there without actually using these go to next keyframe arrows, I may have made a change and created an additional keyframe there inadvertently, which would have created a lot of issues. Sorry. So I need to make sure I use these little arrows to move between keyframes. Okay, now that's the one I've got to adjust as far as position is concerned, so let's do that quickly. That's sorted out. Let's see if I've got to adjust anything else. No, it appears to be fine. Alright, so let's play that back from the beginning. Looks great. Flies over the net and back to the paddle, flies over the net, back to the paddle, so on and so forth, and we have a relatively basic animation going there. Now let's look at what else we can do with this. Alright, let's move back to the beginning. Now I'd like to make a few adjustments. Do you notice here that the ball has the paddle has already struck the tennis ball, but it's still in one position, and I've actually waited till the paddle has stopped moving to start the ball moving. I would prefer to have the ball starting to move as soon as the paddle touches it. So I'm going to move back to, let's say, somewhere here, and to make sure that the ball starts moving at that position, where when the paddle is in that position, all I need to do is come back up here, grab my position keyframe, and just simply pull it back in time. Okay, which means the animation is going to start at that point. So let's see how that works out. Yep, even that is not good enough. I would prefer to have it starting as soon as the paddle hits it there, maybe. Let's see how good that might look. Yep, that looks a little more realistic. That's all right, I reckon. Yep, that's not too bad, not too bad, not too bad again. Yep, that works fine. Now, let's go back to where we can see the path of the ball and see what we can do with the path to make the whole animation look a little more realistic. So to have the path displaying, we can simply go back and hit the little box in front of motion. There you go. Now the path is displaying. Let's go back all the way. Yep, that's the first position. So what we can do here is, especially graphic designers, you'll be familiar with the little handles that start appearing when you look at the path. So for example, I can pick the little handles there and start varying how the ball is going to travel, or varying the path that the ball is going to travel. So I can basically get it to travel in a curved path as opposed to a straight line. I can make the ball travel in a slightly curved path, and you have control over the angles of that curve by basically dragging these handles. You can make it a sharp turn or a very curvy turn. You can imagine that, or rather you can assume that the ball has been hit with a spin. Let's say if it was tennis, there are people who can actually hit the ball and get it to spin, so the ball will not travel straight, it will travel at a sort of a curved, in a curved direction. So this is what you can do with the path tool. Let's have a look at what that might work out to look like. Yep, there you go. So it's curving quite a bit, and yep, so you can keep adjusting those curves for as long as you like. Yep, let's add a bit of a curve here as well. Alrighty, now let's do one more thing. So we've animated position, Then we went on an animated scale. When we animated scale, we had to adjust positioning of the ball because the ball got smaller. Let's now add a bit of rotation to the ball. Okay, so let's bring it back to its first position here. Move to and fro to make sure that you're at the right position. And let's go and hit the stopwatch button on rotation. So there we go. That creates a new keyframe for rotation, and rotation is currently at 0. Let's move to the next position, and there let's go crazy with rotation. Let's go and increase that to about 126% rotation, and let's go back and see what effect that had. Yep, so the ball's rotating now. Let's make it rotate a bit more. So let's move back to that keyframe. I could have hit that arrow or that arrow. And then let's increase that value. Let's go nuts. Okay. So I'm clicking here, holding and dragging. That's how I'm getting those numbers to change. Let's now have a look at what that rotation looks like. Yep, that looks interesting. Maybe it needs to rotate a lot more. I think I like a lot of rotation on the ball. I'm gonna go nuts. Let's have a look. Yep, alright, that looks a lot more interesting. Right, now we've got rotation from point 1, or rather position 1 to position 2, which looks like that. Let's now move the playhead to position number 3, and let's once again maybe get the ball to rotate the other way. So I'm just picking the value and moving my mouse to the left where it's changing the values obviously, and that's going to get it to rotate even further. Yep, so there we go, we got the rotation going. Now that you've got the idea, I'm just going to go from position to position and go nuts with the rotation values. Yep, and one more, and one last one there. All done. Let's have a quick look at what that looks like now. Yep, there we go, there we go, there we go, and there we go, and that looked like it was a faster shot, and that's it. So that's pretty much it. So we first off we animated position, then we animated scale, and when we animated scale, I must remind you that we had to adjust positions. That's fine, as long as you make sure when you are making those position adjustments that you make sure that your playhead is on those particular position keyframes, then make the adjustments for the gaps. It doesn't really matter that this particular fella is not in that position, because anyway, since there's no keyframe before it, it's going to retain that 46% value. But if it makes you feel any better or like to have things laid out neatly, you can grab that fella and move it there. And remember that all gaps between keyframes always represent time, or that's basically time in between those gaps. So the nearer or the closer that these keyframes get to each other, the shorter the time duration for the animation. The further they get, the longer it takes for any particular movement or size change. I hope this demo has helped you. Just let me know if you need further help with this. Thanks a lot. Bye.